Buhari is a shameless irredentive.
Does that statement require further adumbration? That man has already established the fact of his uselessness before he died.
Uselessness?
Complete uselessness, unless you are talking to the ruination of Nigeria.
Nigeria's president from 2015 to 2023.
The tragedy that befell Nigeria. Buhari was a tragedy, an unmitigated tragedy. That man destroyed every illusion of a united Nigeria. A man that looked at an entire region and described them as a dot in the circle. A man that was so completely prebendal that he thought nothing, just like the current affliction that is in Aso Rock. He thought nothing of making everybody in a circle Fulanis. In a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country, he sat down and superintended the handing over of the country to a Muslim ticket in this country. Look, Buhari, may we never see his like again in this country, because nobody has been more ruinous to Nigeria than that guy, unless we are beginning to factor in the reign of Bulaba. They are cut from the same cloth.
The reign of who?
Bulaba, Bala Blue. I am very deliberate about ridiculing our leaders or rulers. I am very, very deliberate about it.
What does Bulaba mean?
He is the one that should be answering that question. Wasn't he the one that said Bala Blue, Bulaba, blue, blue, blue?
Can you give meaning to those words?
He's the only one who will give meaning. I don't know what he meant. He was speaking esoteric languages.
Yes, esoteric languages can be powerful.
But he's the only one who can give you the interpretation. I found no dictionary where I can find the meaning of Bala Blue, 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 blah, blue, blah, blue.
From the sound, can we give it meaning?
I am not sure I am able to do that, but what I do know is that it sounds quite comical. So when I feel like laughing, I remind myself that I'm being ruled by Bala Blue, Bulaba.
You said he's an affliction.
Which one of them? Buhari or Tinubu?
Tinubu?
Look, every ruler of Nigeria is an affliction to the Nigerian. What have they brought to relieve the condition of the Nigerian?
There are times I think you should be president.
I think at some point, I might get crazy enough to think I will do it.
We don't want you to be crazy.
You actually have to be crazy to do anything in this country. You have to be.
You have to be?
You have to be. Haven't you noticed that when I have something profound to say, I always make sure to tell my listener that I'm a madman? It's easier for them to hear me when I describe myself in such unflattering terms.
Madman?
It's easier for them to hear me because if I wasn't the mad one, I shouldn't be the only one who is able to see that the insanity with which we are living.
But you're not the only one.
But what are the others doing?
They are saying it. You like Showores, you know?
Those are the talking madmen. Look, what is insanity? Insanity is doing what your society frowns upon. End of story. That is what insanity is.
The society does not frown upon what you do.
If the society does not frown against the things that I do, the things that Showore is doing, how come that society is not more receptive to the ideas we preach?
Perhaps you have to change your strategy.
Okay.
Perhaps you need to sit down and say you need power and begin to plot.
You see, if you remember when we were talking about Lasso, you asked how come I ran for president in Lasso. And I told you, I ran for the presidency in Lasso because I became tired with the status quo. I became tired of constantly complaining that we could do it differently. And they were not listening to me. So one day I got into school and I asked the chairman of the electoral committee, who is a friend, Bayo, who and who have taken the presidential nomination form? And he mentioned the names. I said, lie, I can't allow this. I don't want another session of coping with all kind of goony-goo-goos. Give me the form. So I picked up the presidential nomination form and I ran. Maybe I might just get crazy enough and decide that that's what I need to do in this situation as well. But for now, I am not crazy enough yet.
Please go crazy so that you can run.
See, I don't believe Votrons can save Nigeria. I believe that we can be saved, but I do believe that that can only happen when the bulk of the people are mobilized to demand the change.
Mobilize them.
Even if I'll do anything, it's too late. I can't do anything in 2027.
Yes, but you can start now.
It's not impossible. Let's just say that.
Because while I was coming here, at the point I said, no, I'm tired of reading, I closed your book. I said, let Farotimi run for president.
Maybe one day.
I said, let them come out and contest.
Maybe one day. It's not a thought that I have ruled out. Let me be very, very clear.
So whatever has been there, he should remain there. He should keep moving.
It's not a thought that I would dismiss. It is a thought that has occurred to me, and I'm giving it some serious thoughts.
Please go mad.
I may.
We are waiting for him to be mad.
I may.
You write with strong words.
I speak with stronger words.
Sometimes one will say, no. Tole Farotimi is too hard.
I write to provoke.
Yes, you provoked me.
To provoke. I'm intentional with my choice of words.
Intentional.
Very, very intentional.
What does it take to write a book?
Truth. Any fool can write. But if you really want a book that will last the test of time, tell the truth.
I want you to read this book.
It's available for them free of charge. I don't know. Nigerians just don't read. I made these books available for free download. When this one was a year old, I made it available for free download. When this one was less than a year old, on the first anniversary of the NSAS massacre, I made it available for free download.
Are they downloading?
Oh, yes. Go to my website. You can download them for free. Of what use is a book that is not read?
Thank you.
It's of no use. I don't write in order to make money. I write to disseminate information, to challenge, to provoke. So if I have written and you are not reading, we can't argue the points I've made in the book. You can't be enriched by the ideas that I have shared. Of what use is the book?
You said the middle class is in a constant race for survival.
But it is.
Even as the objective realities should have announced to it that it is fighting a lost battle against the forces of feudalism. You like that word, feudalism.
But that is the sense. Look, when I speak about impunity, you must understand that what has battered the impunity is the need to preserve the feudal system. A feudal system governs Nigeria. The people who battered Nigeria, the British, they come from a background of a class system that had its root in feudalism, the monarchy. But the powers of the monarchy was curbed. They began curbing the powers of the monarchy with the Magna Carta. But unfortunately, when they came to Nigeria, Lord Lugard did not find a Magna Carta to curb the powers of the monarchy. And he found the most extreme and systemized in the northern part of Nigeria. So he fell in love with the Fulani Caliphate, the Sokoto Caliphate. He fell in love with the Kanem Bonu Empire. They were both more readily applicable to indirect rule. So Nigeria was founded on feudal foundations to varying degrees. In the East, where there wasn't a systemized rulership system, they raised one, created warrant chiefs. In northern Nigeria, even in parts where the Fulani influence had not reached, they extended it. Places that were not Islamized deliberately so that the slave stock could be kept in northern Nigeria, what you call the Middle Belt today, was largely un-Islamized deliberately, because if they were Islamized, they would not have been able to keep them as slaves. And slave trade was the most important of the trades sustaining the two Islamic empires in northern Nigeria. So they deliberately avoided conquering those parts so that it does not become
The jihadis.
The jihadists deliberately. Let me explain what
they could not
No.
conquer.
There were parts that they deliberately avoided conquering.
Okay.
You know, in Islamic jurisprudence, you have what you call the Dan Haber and the Dar Salam. The Dar Haber is where the unbelievers live. You can enslave the unbeliever. But if you conquer the land, they are forced to convert, and you cannot enslave a fellow Muslim. So they were deliberate about not conquering certain parts. What they did was that they built garrisons in places like Kotangora, Kotonkafe, Lafia. They built garrisons, and they would come during the plantings, like the season when people will plant, harvest. That's when the Fulanis will come with their cattle. They will stay in their garrisons, and from there they will go slave raiding. For centuries, before the British defeated them and then ended slavery. Slavery, I think, was still even allowed to some extent in northern Nigeria up until 1946 or thereabout. So you have a situation where Nigeria was founded on a feudal system. The feudalism that was prevalent in Fulani society has jumped host. That virus is in every state of Nigeria. Now all our governors are emirs. The president of Nigeria is a sultan. Your federal House of Representatives, the Senate, is just an alkali council. That's why it does exactly as the president demands. Your legislators your judges are singing on his mandate, they will stand.
Did the judges sing?
Oh, bah.
They were quiet, weren't they?
So who was doing the singing?
The band.
Oh, it was the band.
Yeah.
Okay.
But except you are saying the judges are part of the band.
Well, as far as I can tell, there was a gathering of judges and they were busy singing on his mandate, they will stand.
Chapter 4 of your book, Birth of the Fulani Hegemony.
Yes.
Hegemonies are creations of history, you said.
Mm-hmm.
To understand and fully appreciate the impact of the Fulani hegemony over Nigeria, it is apposite that we examine the history of Nigeria and its very foundation. You have given us a brief of that history, right?
I can only try.
The British were the sole powers within the Nigerian space. Why did you choose this topic, the birth of the Fulani hegemony?
Because that is the root of the problem with which we are grappling today.
The root?
That is the root
How?
Of Nigeria's problem. Every country, every nation in the world develops off the back of an hegemony. There would always be an overarching power that propels the growth of nations. If you look to the American state, for instance, you find very quickly that it was the WASPs, the West Anglo-Saxon Protestants, that built America.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure you'll find a single Catholic amongst the persons who sat down in Virginia to write the American Constitution. So it's always a select few in a larger society who usually take it upon themselves to bring their overarching philosophy to propel the whole. In Nigeria, the reality is that it is the Fulani hegemony that was favored from its foundations. And that hegemony is a feudalistic one. It is found on class. It believes that if you are born into a class, that's where you should stay. So if you are born a noble, you stay a noble. If you are born a peasant, you stay a peasant. If you are born to serve the noble class, you stay there and you serve them. There is rarely any migration between the classes. That was the feudal system. In Yoruba land, we didn't have that systemized environment. People could move more easily across the class lines. It was the same in the land of the Igbohos and in most parts of southern Nigeria. But northern Nigeria was largely feudalized, whether you're talking about the Kanem Borno Empire or whether you were talking about the Sokoto Caliphate. And when the British came with their indirect rule, they sustained those systems. And those systems, that hegemony, emerged out of the ruin of the First Republic. It was that hegemony that took us to war in July 1966. It was that hegemony that prosecuted the Civil War.
Did the hegemony take us to war? And how did that happen?
If you really look at it, you have the coup of January 1966. If you even read the coup speech, particularly the one by Nzogu, you'll see very clearly that it was a rebellion against a class. Now, the counter coup was a reaction to what happened in January.
Was that sponsored by the Fulani?
If you listen to the historical accounts or you read the historical accounts, you find very quickly that what happened was that the NPC elements that had lost power in January worked largely to unite opposition against Ironsi and the military, that the people who came to power in January. So what you had in July was a reaction to what happened in January. Now, that could have ended at Aburi. It did not end. It only began, or at least calcified, with Aburi, because after Aburi it became clear that we could not arrive at a common ground.
But some have said Aburi was the end of Nigeria if that agreement was implemented.
If Aburi that was not implemented, what was implemented is what has now ended Nigeria, hasn't it?
No, Nigeria is still here.
Yeah, like a zombie.
Nigeria is still
Jekyll
here.
and Hyde.
Nigeria is still here.
Serving nobody's interest.
Serving the interest of some
Of
people.
a few. So it's still here, but as what? It's not beneficial to the victims. Even the persons who believe that they are beneficiaries of Nigeria are actually victims of Nigeria themselves.
So Fulani hegemony led us to war.
Fulani hegemony led us to war because reason flew out of the window.
But Gowon became the head of state, not a Fulani.
Well, here is the thing. Since you're talking about Gowon, let's go there. Gowon was not the highest ranking member of the military. Gowon was the middle ground position, the compromise. He was the only one that was acceptable to the actual plotters of the coup. Muritala Mohammed and the others. They were willing to accept Gowon. And if you know the history of Nigeria at that time, you realize that even settling for Gowon was real politic. It wasn't the desire of the coup plotters. It would have been beyond the pale to refuse Admiral Way, refuse what's the name of this one, Ogundikpe, and then insist that even Gowon, who was then the next in rank from the north, he was the highest ranking northern officer. If you are now saying you don't want Gowon because he's a Christian, that was where the problem would have started, because the bulk of the officer corps after the 1960s, after the July coup, were from the Middle Belt. So there was no way anybody would have been able to make the argument that it was Muritala Mohammed that should then take power over and above Gowon. How would you have explained that to the likes of T.Y. Danjuma, a fellow Christian like Gowon?
But it was a coup.
It was a coup, quite all right. But even in military circle, it's usually the highest ranking officer that you put in place now. And in this case, you've already discounted at least 2 officers of southern origin who are higher in rank.
They were not part of the coup.
You see, that's the thing. If they were not part of the coup, if they had allowed that sentiment to take hold, what would have happened was that it would have been easier to pigeonhole the coup of July 1966 as a Fulani coup, just like they tagged the coup of January an Igbo coup. It would have then been very easy to tag the July 1966 coup a Fulani coup.
Was the January coup an Igbo coup?
Of course not. But that was the propaganda. The truth is usually the first casualty in war.
But they took out the head of the so-called Fulani hegemony.
Look, the person, if you look at the person of Kaduna Nzogu dispassionately, you'll find very quickly that Kaduna Nzogu was more of an Hausa man than an Igbo man.
Does that matter? His name is Chukwuma.
You see, the fact that the truth does not matter is why we are where we are. When the truth does not matter, when you subjectivize the truth to the point where it loses its potency, you arrive at destinations as insane as Nigeria.
Do not forget, you have concluded that it is an indigent state, not a citizen state. So Nzogu was not an indigent.
See, this indigent citizen thing that we've done to ourselves, I've done a fantastic job of guaranteeing the sustainability of the evil that has captured all of us. A person lived all his life in Kaduna to the point where he even had to take the name of the city as part of his own name. all his personal staff, including the doctor who treated him because of the wound he got in the exercise that morning. That doctor was Fulani. The man would not take food or medication from anyone else except his own inner cabal. All of whom are northerners. It was just convenient to label it an Igbo coup. Contemporary account of the coup will tell you that after the coup on January 15, there was widespread jubilation, even in northern Nigeria, particularly Kaduna.
You liked the coup?
Sorry?
You liked the coup?
Unfortunately, I wasn't alive at the time. I might have taken part in it. But as far as I'm concerned, as a student of history,
you said if you were alive?
If I was alive, I would have taken part in that coup.
In that coup?
Oh, yes, I would have taken part. Inevitably. If you took the time to
read... That was
a
bloody coup.
Oh, yes, it was. Sometimes it's necessary.
But remember, in your book, you're not recommending violence.
I am not a violent man.
In your book, you stated it clearly.
I am still stating it today that I would avoid violence where and when I can.
But you would have joined in Nzogu coup.
That coup would have had me participating. It was a function of the times. How old was Nzogu? I was a young man. If I was that age, when I was that age, let me share something with you. I think it was 1993, after the annulment of June 12th. There was a collection, there were a few of us. We were thinking of raiding police stations to collect guns to start a guerrilla warfare in this country. That was in 1993. How old was I? I was in my 20s. We were young enough, romantic enough to believe that we could change things, if not by the force of our personality, then certainly by force. So if I was alive in 1966, if I'd seen the same evil that them Kaduna and Nzogu had seen, and I was at that age, I would most definitely have been part and parcel of that coup.
But you were not a soldier, and you are not one.
Well, who knows what I might have been or not been at that time.
Do not die in their war.
It wouldn't have been their war, it would have been our own. That's just the reality. When I say do not die in their war, it was a call to clarity. When politicians are fighting their pitched battles and you go and take side with one politician, you just die for nothing. That's their own war. But when you identify your own interests and you stand behind it and you are prepared to fight and die for it, I would applaud you. Those are worthy deaths.